Alright, what's going on guys? Today, we're going to be upgrading the Vivien of the Arkbow Planeswalker Deck. As always, do keep in mind that these are not intended to be tier 1 competitive decks. If you want that, consider checking out the latest tournament results. What we'll be doing is upgrading this deck, card by card, sticking to this deck's themes, and doing it on a budget as we will not exceed $15 USD with our upgrades. And if the currency isn't relevant to your area, just know that $15 is the MSRP of most Planeswalker decks, so hopefully that gives you some context as to what we're spending here. Not a whole lot. So, the Vivien of the Arkbow Planeswalker Deck is a mono-green, mana ramp stompy deck. It uses things like Druid of the Cow and Elvish Rejuvenator to ramp into mana. The Druid can tap for mana and the Rejuvenator helps us search for more, and then it uses all this mana to cast things like Aggressive Mammoth and Palaka Worm, which are, well, very big and scary. Anyway, the unique cards that come with the deck, the cards you can only get by purchasing it, are Vivien herself, along with Ursine Champion, Vivien's Jaguar, and Scala Wolf. Although none of these are particularly great, to be honest. Speaking of not particularly great, the deck also comes with things like Thornhide Wolves and Bristling Boar. And while these cards are bad, like should never be in the deck kind of bad. So let's take out cards like this and replace them with things that are better. Much better. Let's get started. Alright, so first off we're going to take out the Thornhide Wolves and replace it with a Territorial Allosaurus. So let's see here. The dinosaur costs 1 less mana, and yet it has 1 extra power. I mean, we can ignore the dinosaur's text box entirely. Just completely ignore that. Do you want to spend 5 mana for a 4/5 or spend 1 less mana for a 5/5? Yeah, that's better already, regardless of the text box. And then, the Allosaurus also has the added bonus of having a kicker ability. If you pay an extra 3 mana, you can have it fight a smaller creature when it enters the battlefield. This is 100% optional, and really, you should just cast this on turn 4 most of the time, but if you draw it in the late game with a bunch of extra mana, then sure, you can kick it and blow up a creature, in addition to having a 4 mana 5/5, instead of a 5 mana 4/5. Either way, it's better. Next, we're going to take out 2 Bristling Boars and replace them with 2 Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. Once again, this is a pretty obvious upgrade. They are both 4 mana 4/3s, but whereas the boar is kind of evasive, sort of, the bear makes all of our expensive creatures cost 2 less mana to cast, and when it attacks, it gives all creatures with 4 power or more +1/+1 and trample. So not only does it fuel out a bunch of big monsters, but it also makes them bigger and trample over our opponent's creatures. Pretty nice. Also remember that the Goreclaw will pump itself up when it attacks, so even if you don't have any other creature, it's a 5/4 with trample when it's attacking, so either way, it's better than the boar for sure, right? Next, we're going to take out 3 Vivien's Jaguars and replace them with 3 Steelleaf Champions. Steelleaf Champion is one of the all-stars in mono green stompy. The card is just great. For just 3 mana, we get a 5/4, and it cannot be chump blocked because small creatures can't block it. This thing is a powerhouse, and we can even get it out on turn 2 with the help of a Llanowar Elf. And a 5/4 on turn 2 can simply end games. The Jaguar, on the other hand, is a 3/2 with reach, and though we can constantly return it to our hand, it requires us to have Vivien in play, which we probably won't most of the time. So Steelleaf Champion is just better. It's always going to be good. We never have to worry about whether or not we have a Planeswalker in play. It's just plain good. Next, we're going to take out 2 Meteor Golems for 2 Llanowar Elves. This is what's going to allow us to get those turn 2 Steelleaf Champions. And trust me, sometimes those games are just free wins because your opponent won't have an answer fast enough. Even without the Steelleaf Champion though, the elf will ramp us into our big creatures faster, which is our main goal with this deck. The Meteor Golem, on the other hand, is just clunky and not great, not to mention that we're playing green, so if we're going to spend 7 mana on something, we can probably get something way cooler than a 3/3, so the Llanowar Elves are just going to serve us better. Ramping into mana is what we want to do. Next, we're going to take out 2 Scala Wolves for 2 more Llanowar Elves. This just gives us a much better chance to get that turn 2 Steelleaf Champion, which is probably going to win us a lot more games than whatever the Scala Wolf is doing. I mean, it's a 5 mana 3/3, which is pretty bad, and while it does let us look at the top 5 cards of our library and grab a card, I think it's much more important that we ramp into mana and get our bigger stuff out much faster. So while the Skull Wolf is nice, ramping is more important. Next, we're going to take out 2 Colossal Dreadmauls and replace them with 2 Gigantosauruses. So, the Dreadmauls are 6/6s with trample that cost 6 mana. The Gigantosauruses cost 1 less mana to cast, so it comes down a turn faster, and it's a frickin' 10/10. It's pretty big. Unfortunately, we do lose the trample, but hey, we do have those Gore Claws, plus the fact that we can get this on turn 4 and just, start beating down is probably worth it. It will definitely dominate the battlefield when you cast it. Next, we're going to take out 1 Oaken Form and replace it with 1 Blanchwood Armor. So the Oaken Form costs 3 mana and gives the creature +3/+3. The Blanchwood Armor also costs 3 mana, but it gives the creature +X/+X, where X is the number of forest we control. So if we have 3 mana to cast it, it's going to give the creature +3/+3 anyway, just like the Oaken Form, but it could also give the creature +5/+5, or +7/+7, so on and so forth. The Blanchwood Armor it scales up. It's going to give +3/+3 just like the Oaken Form, but it's also just going to give more and more as the game goes on. So yeah, just a clear improvement. Blanchwood Armor better than Oaken Form, at least in mono green with a bunch of basic forest. Next, we'll take out a Declare Dominance for 1 more of the Blanchwood Armors. So the Declare Dominance is kind of interesting. While it makes a creature bigger, it also forces your opponent to use all of their blockers on the creature it's enchanting when it's attacking. So that's kind of cool and all, but 5 mana is a lot to dedicate to it, and I'd much rather just, at that point, just put a big giant monster in play. So I don't know. I like the Blanchwood Armors, they're kind of great. Next, I want to take out 2 Plummets and replace them with Adventurous Impulse. Plummets are fine for the sideboard, but in a lot of games they're just going to be useless because your opponent won't have flyers. So instead of playing a dead card, let's play Impulse, which will let us dig through our deck for cool big creatures to cast, or for more land if we need it. It's just going to serve us a lot better in most games, but again, if you are playing sideboards, you can definitely put the Plummets there if you want. And then finally, we're going to take out 2 forests for 2 more impulses, because why not? If we're low on land, we can just get it with the impulse anyway, and if we have extra lands, then we can just get more cool creatures to cast. So yeah, this just seems like a pretty easy and obvious improvement, especially since the deck is running 26 lands out of the box, which is kind of a lot. Anyway, that's it for the deck. If you want to spend a little bit more money on this deck, there are tons of options. There are a lot of amazing green creatures in standard right now. Things like Steel Leaf Champion, we had 3 of them, a 4th one wouldn't be terrible. Carnage Tyrant and Ghalta Primal Hunger. Man, Ghalta in particular is great in this deck because most of the time it's a 2 mana 12/12 with trample, and the Carnage Tyrant is amazing against control decks because it has hexproof and it can't be countered. Unfortunately, these are a little bit expensive, so we definitely can't afford them on our budget in this video, but if you happen to open them in packs or trade for them, yeah, they should go right into the deck. They're kind of amazing. And also, just as a side note, Vinemare is pretty good as a budget option against control decks. It has hexproof so your opponent can't target it, and it can't be blocked by black creatures, so it's kind of great, especially if you put those Blanchwood Armors on it, because it just gets massive and your opponent can't target it. So those are something to consider as well. At the very least, you could put them in the sideboard, and if you get matched up against decks that are just killing all of your stuff, then you can bring in the Vinemares and they can't kill it, so that's nice. You could also upgrade the Vivien in the deck with Vivien Reed. This is a clear upgrade, but unfortunately it's very expensive. Probably not for everyone, but yeah, the problem with the Vivien in the deck is that she is a win more card. That's to say, she's really good when you are already winning, but really bad if you're playing from behind. Her abilities are great, they're really good if we have creatures, but they're completely useless and literally do nothing if we don't have anything in play. So if we're winning, she's great. If we're losing, she doesn't help us stop losing. That's called a win more card, usually not that great. Another very obvious upgrade that we can't afford is Ursine Champion with Thorn Lieutenant. The elf is strictly better than the champion. They both cost 2 mana, but the lieutenant is a 2/3 compared to the champion, which is a 2/2. They both have a 6 mana ability, but the champion gets +3/+3 and the lieutenant gets +4/+4. Then, if your opponent targets the lieutenant to kill it, you get a free token. So, they're identical in every way, but the lieutenant punishes your opponent for trying to kill it, has an extra point of toughness, and gets an extra +1/+1 when you activate it. So there is no reason to play the champion over the lieutenant. The lieutenant is just better, but unfortunately, they're also expensive, like $3 each. So to replace them, it's like 12 bucks. So can't afford it with our $15 budget. Anyway, going forward with the deck, if you want to include some of the more expensive cards, the things you want to consider taking out are things like Gaspark Twins, Palaka Worm, and Aggressive Mammoth. All of these would just be better if they were Carnage Tyrants and Ghaltas instead. Anyway, that's it for the deck. Unfortunately, many of the green Stompy cards are very expensive, but that's because the deck is actually somewhat competitive. It's not a tier 1 deck right now, but it was in the last standard environment before it rotated. So yeah, the deck was competitive. It's still pretty good. It's very playable at an F&M level. And if you wanted an F&M deck, you could probably get a mono green Stompy deck going for like $50 to $60 or so, and it would probably be pretty decent. But again, that will require things like Ghalta, maybe Carnage Tyrants, at least 1 or 2, and those Thorn Lieutenants. But yeah, the deck does have potential to be pretty good. But regardless, whether or not you go that far or not, if you were playing this deck out of the box, then what we have now should be significantly more powerful, and it definitely gives you a better chance of winning than what you were originally given when you bought the deck, and all for not a whole ton of money. So anyway, if you like this video and you want to see more Planeswalker deck upgrade videos, I have a playlist dedicated to them, and you can find a link to that in the description below. Also be sure to check out the channel as I create budget-focused Magic the Gathering videos twice a week, so check that out. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.